Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hindu Explain series. I am Kushagra Goel, and today marks the beginning of the budget session of the parliament, right? So as I had stated that till now all the economics topics that we have discussed in the newspaper for the past 3 months, all of them will culminate in the budget, and that will be the most important topic for your examination point of view. So today the economic survey will be presented and then the budget, right, on February 1. So our eyes will be on that, and I will be covering those topics in depth as and whatever details they are presented in, right? So from next day, tomorrow onwards, we'll be covering them in a little bit more depth. So make sure you have your notepad and your pen in your hand, because those details will be the things that you will have to note down and remember, right? So we'll begin with doubts from yesterday's video. A lot of students had economic based doubts only, which is natural. So I will begin addressing them one by one, right? So first of all, one doubt student had was with the meaning of monetary-fiscal linkages are crucial to catalyst the demand. What is monetary and fiscal linkages, right? So monetary, money supply, fiscal, government revenue, right? So fiscal revenue is the revenue that government generates from the taxes it receives, from the income it generates from its assets. Monetary supply is the policies that affect the flow of the money in the economy, particularly through credit, right? Money supply, businesses work on credit system. If credit is easier, they will take more money. That increases money supply. If the government is spending more, there is higher fiscal supply, right? So those linkages, monetary and fiscal policy linkages, is something that needs to be kept an eye on, how the government balances it and what will be the effect of that on the overall economy, right? Because that will be crucial to the demand, right? Right now, Indian economy is on a downturn. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, we had a sagging demand. That is, overall aggregate demand in the Indian economy was minimal. There was high supply and low demand. So the government's budget should ideally be addressing this concern, right? Then next thing is between input tax credit and double taxation treaty. See, input tax is something that I explained 2 days ago also, right? So for example, again I will give the same example. I am a biscuit maker in Madhya Pradesh. I take wheat from Punjab. So the wheat that I borrowed, so I took wheat grains and I borrowed or purchased that. So on that I paid tax. Then I converted that wheat grains into flour and made biscuits and sold that. So I paid tax twice. One on purchasing the wheat grains and then converting into flour and then making biscuits and selling that, right? So I am paying tax on the same wheat which is used in the biscuits and which was used to make the flour twice, right? This is double taxation. Now input credits are those that are then refunded. So the tax that I paid on the same commodity twice, the first tax that I paid while purchasing the wheat grains, I will be refunded that by the department. This is double taxation, right? Now similarly, a product, my biscuits that were manufactured in Madhya Pradesh are exported to, let's say, United Kingdom. So I paid tax in India and then I sold them in United Kingdom and paid tax there also. That is again double taxation. So countries have double taxation treaties to prevent this double taxation, right? What will they do is, one, they will decide who will be the one collecting tax on a particular commodity, or they will split the revenue between the two countries on particular products. So when countries do certain treaties to avoid double taxation, those are double taxation treaties. And input tax credit are refund of tax domestically when a commodity is taxed twice, right? Then moving ahead, the next doubt students had was about off budget borrowing and disinvestment of government. right? So first, off budget borrowing. So what is budget? Ideally, if you have 100 rupees in your pocket, you will spend 100 rupees only. That is your upper limit, right? But governments, because they are sovereign, people believe they will be able to pay back. So off budget borrowing are those borrowings that government does without actually having the money to pay it back immediately. So for example, I have 100 rupees in my pocket, but I purchased a commodity of 105. So that 5 rupee that I am extra, which I don't have the money for, that is my off budget borrowing. All right. Next is disinvestment. So there are certain, for example, public sector organizations such as Life Insurance of India or State Bank of India. Those are owned by the government. Those businesses are owned directly by the government. When the government sells its stake or shares in those organizations, that process is known as disinvestment, right? So Air India is a airline that is run by the government. Similarly, there are other airlines which are run by Tata or Etihad or Emirates. They are private airlines, right? So when government of India will sell Air India to any private person, that process will be known as disinvestment, right? Moving ahead, another doubt students had was about liquidity infusion programs. What is liquidity infusion? Again, monetary supply. So monetary is money, liquidity is also money. They are synonyms for the same term in economics jargon, right? So programs that infuse more liquidity, cheaper credit, the Mudra loan scheme of the government is a liquidity infusion program, right? Then another question students had was what is the meaning of the word maximalist? Right? So now we have addressed all the economics doubts. So this is a political doubt, right? Maximalist approach. Maximalist approach is my way or the highway, that I want this and I will not budge from my position. So for example, let's say we are negotiating on a sale of a house, right? So first I quote the house as rupees 20 lakh rupees, right? And then you say, no, I will only pay 18 lakh. But then I am like, no, I will only sell it for 20 lakh. Then you quote a price of 19 lakh. And again, I am not budging from my position. I am still saying 20 lakh, take it or not, or take it or leave it. So I am adopting a maximalist approach. So the editorial stated that, see, the farmers are adopting a maximalist approach. That is, that they want nothing but the repeal of the farm laws, right? So that is a maximalist approach that the editorial feels the farmers are adopting. The farmers have responded that, see, this was our original demand and this is our only demand because we are the farmers, we are the ones who produce it, and we don't want these reforms to take place, right? Then moving towards international affairs, one doubt students had is Donald Trump has left office. Why should we impeach him now? Now see, for example, consider any other crime that has taken place, right? That person, let's say corruption, right? Similarly, an official takes bribe. After that, he retires or his tenure is over. Will you still not punish him for the crime he did in the office? That is the logic that the Democratic Party has adopted. That, see, the crime for which we are charging him, that at that point of time this person was in office. The problem we have and the idea of justice is this, that if you commit a thing when you were in charge, the signal to everyone else should also be that when you are in a public office, you cannot do things that are non-constitutional, right? Now another thing, the reason why Donald Trump, the Democratic Party wants to impeach him. So one is that they want to make him pay for the crime that he did. And secondly is that, see, there is a 2 tenure limit in US Constitution. So Donald Trump can still run for office again in 2024, 2028, 2032, whenever he wants to. But if he is impeached, then there is a case that he cannot run again. Now this is the Democrats believe this is a person who incited an insurrection against the elected government. Now if this person runs for office again, imagine what amount of damage he could do to the constitution of US again. Therefore they want to impeach him. So that is the logic the Democratic Party has adopted for impeaching Donald Trump. So on that note, we will begin with the today's newspaper, right? So on the left hand side, each year, so this is a constitutional provision, each year at the beginning of the budget session or the first session of the parliament in a calendar year, there is a presidential address given. Now the opposition parties have stated that they will boycott the president's address because the president is a president of the entire nation and he is not listening to the demand of the other members of the house and the country, right? So on that note, they have adopted a boycott call. Then on the left hand side, Delhi police has issued notice to different farm leaders for inquiry into the violence that took place on 26th January, right? Then apart from that, our former vice president has released his autobiography. The name of that is By Many a Happy Accident. It is by Hamid Ansari. He was a 2-tenure vice president of India, right? So that is a news static GK that you should book in news. All right. Then apart from that, moving ahead on the front page, this is Supreme Court making a statement that see, stopping hate on television is essential to prevent riots. That see, you have to bud hatred at the beginning itself. Only then can you prevent riots from actually taking place. So this is just general comments. This is not a particular order or a judgment that the court made, right? Then moving ahead, apart from that, on the national front, it's about the farmer protest, more inquiries, what is happening, what is not, all of that, right? And then moving ahead on the editorial front, right? So the editorial front, again, global antitrust and the challenge of big tech. The issue is about checking their monopoly power while encouraging their positive externalities and consumer surplus. So before I explain the editorial, there are certain terms that need to be explained. What is externalities? Externalities is an economic concept. So you see a light lamp, right, or a street light that you see. Not everyone pays taxes for it, but the benefit of that is extended to everyone who walks on the road. That is a externality that exists. So in economics, the concept is externalities are those benefits that happen to all those who may not have paid for it. So similarly, social media platforms bring about certain positive externalities. How is that? Not everyone, let's say, uses Twitter, but information on Twitter is then produced in other news organizations and then that is published. So there is a positive externality. What is consumer surplus? Consumer surplus in general is an effect that big tech or tech companies create, that they enhance the number or multiply the number of people using the service. So even if, let's say, someone uses WhatsApp, but by effect he will also then have to install or get an internet connection, and through that he can get access to other facilities of the internet, right? So that is a consumer surplus, a positive effect that technology applications or platforms create. So what is this editorial talking about? This is talking about how certain companies have become big or bigger than even nations. So for example, Facebook has approximately 3 billion active users, which is more than the population of the largest populous country, that is China, right? The model here is, this is in light of how there is WhatsApp who has changed its privacy policy. Now the editorial states that what we have to adopt is, one, we realize that we do not want them to become monopolies. That is, one company dominates the entire scene, right? Then they could have negative effect on the population. So the challenge is of how you break down these monopolies but maintain the benefit that exists from social media or big tech companies in general. So that is a policy statement from the editorial point of view. Moving ahead, on the left hand side, tempered optimism. Even with declining infection rates, public activity needs to be guided by caution. So yesterday it was announced there were restrictions in different spheres that were reduced further. So what it tells us is that even though the number of COVID cases is receding, we should not let our guard down, because there is mutation of the virus that is taking place. There is general concern the disease has not been eradicated yet, so we cannot put our guard down, right? Then on the left hand side, for one and all, China should show global leadership and not go down the path of arrogant superpower. So Xi Jinping, as you know, 2 days ago we talked about, he delivered a speech at the virtual World Economic Forum in Davos, and in that he stated that Cold War mentality should not be adopted and countries should follow globalization, rule-based system. All of this smacks of hypocrisy, right? Everyone has spoken out of the hypocrisy of Xi Jinping. What has China done during the crisis? One, it has adopted a active military expansionist system. One, it has threatened the borders of India, it has threatened the borders of South China Sea. Then apart from that, has China followed the rules? Has it for a year it did not allow WHO to enter its border and conduct inquiry for the origin of the coronavirus. Thirdly, it did not provide countries with absolute honesty the information about coronavirus and how it was spreading in China, right? So this is what the editorial also states, that see, actions of China are actually smacks of hypocrisy, and Xi Jinping should actually remind himself that he and his country should be the first one to follow all the global rules before preaching to other countries about following rules in general, right? Then here is another analysis of Alexei Navalny of how he is rising in Russia. Can he actually become a challenger to Vladimir Putin after his 20 years in power in Russia? So all of this is, he has divided opinion, he has an anti-corruption crusade. So Russian economy has oligarchs, that is rich people who control most of the resources, and Russian economy in general is suffering. The people are suffering. So Alexei Navalny has brought out the corruption that exists in these organizations, and that has catapulted him to popularity, right? But even right now, even though he has become a darling of the West, there is concern about how he would actually be if he comes in power in Russia. Plus, in general, right now he is actually not in a state to challenge Vladimir Putin, right? Then moving ahead, there is a discussion about why our other sports haven't reached the height of cricket. So one common theme is that India is not a generally sport playing country. We love the sports we watch, but in general our work culture, our society does not really actively have sporting activities, right? So that is one of the reason that is available, that comes as a common theme. And second is about well-trained coaches. How will you become better in a particular coach when there is no one to tell you what is the better approach, right? So that is another concern. Then remembering the Holocaust. So January 27th also marks United Nations as the victims of the Holocaust. What was the Holocaust? Holocaust was the active action by the Nazi regime under Adolf Hitler to kill Jews and other minorities in the German country, right? Before the World War. The one problem that has been existing since then is the denial and distortion of Holocaust, that now there are active steps to remove from human memory that such a event took place in the history, right? So that is something, therefore such events become important. Why should we remember events that are painful? To remind humanity that what level of evil humans can go to if hate is the one that drives them. Therefore, hate speech becomes a problem. Something on the front page that the CGI also stated, that you need to kill hate speech at its origin, right? And before it takes a nasty turn. For years there was budding hatred that was building. There was people who were inciting hate against Jews, and that led to the Holocaust in Nazi Germany, right? So if active steps had been taken, now see, World United Nations does talk about all of this, but as we know right now, Uyghur Muslims in China are facing a similar kind of forceful denial of their rights, and they are being removed, exterminated. Their culture is being reduced to minority or almost non-existing. But has the world really woken up to it? Are people calling it out? Not enough, right? So there is a common trend in politics in the world that there is a realization that something wrong is happening, but until things really go bad, world powers or political nations really don't act on it. So maybe the lives of those lost in the Holocaust, their troubles were known to people in Europe for a long time, but until they were in a position to win the war, they actually did not do anything to save them, right? And moving ahead on the other national news, again, this is the cases against the validity of the farm bills which have been filed, and the Supreme Court has asked, tell us what are your problems with it, tell us how these affect them, right? And then apart from that, on the national news, it's more and more political in the sense of one party or the other talking about what are the concerns, all of that, elections, election related news, and then the COVID curve is flattening as per the government, right? So the number of cases in India are receding, we know, but we need to keep our guard vigilant, right? Now also there is news about number of people infected with the new strain and where they are located. So this is the UK strain. And then our External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar was talking at a particular event organized by All India Conference on China Studies, organized by Institute of Chinese Study at Delhi and the IIT Madras, which is China Studies Center. So he was talking about, see, now one thing the entire speech can be categorized for is that, see, the war with China took place in 1962. Till then, and only until 1978 that Foreign Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee visited China. So for almost 16 years there were no relation that existed in India and China. Was when Atal Bihari Vajpayee visiting China, did the border dispute between India and China got resolved? No. When Prime Minister Modi hosted Xi Jinping, first in Ahmedabad and then in Mahabalipuram, did the border dispute resolve? No. So Jaishankar talked about the same theme, that see, border dispute was not the prominent one as long as the conflict at the border remained peaceful, but because of Chinese actions that the border does not remain peaceful anymore, the conversation between India and China and their relations cannot remain the same anymore. So that is what his theme from this entire speech is, that because now of military action, the status quo between India and China has changed, right? Then moving ahead, the Chief Justice of India talked about the first sitting of Supreme Court 71 years ago, which was in the court chamber in Parliament. So there are 3 chambers in the Parliament, right? In the 3rd chamber of the Parliament, on January 28 in 1950, the first sitting of the independent India Supreme Court took place, right? And our incumbent CGI spoke about the memory of that, and the statement reads that during the first sitting, the Prime Minister and a lot of Council of Ministers were present. That is, Jawaharlal Nehru was present there. There were 13 Chief Justice of different High Courts who were present, and there was Attorney General, the first Attorney General of India, that is MC Sheetalwad, talked about Supreme Court as in a building nation alive to its national and international duties. The Supreme Court will play a great and singular role in establish itself in the consciousness of the Indian people, right? So this is what in remembrance of what we need to know. Another fact that you need to know, the first CJI then was Sir Harilal Jenkinsundas Kania, right? Justice H.J. Kania was the first CJI of India. So that is something, this article is something that you need to brush up on your static GK for, right? Then apart from that, moving ahead on the international and economics news, right? So this is again the conversation between Iran and US, that US will join the JCPOA when Iran complies with the terms there, right? Then there are countries who were ranked by a think tank, which is the Lowy Institute, which is an Australian think tank, rating countries' response to COVID-19 pandemic. On that, India has been ranked 86 out of 98 countries, and New Zealand has topped the COVID performance index, right? So in general, you can't compare different countries to their COVID responses. Why? Because one, the proximity, two, the size of population, and three, the nature of inherent immunity of the population is very different, right? So therefore, to compare unlike on the same page is not judicious, right? It is not equitable to do so. Nevertheless, make a note of this, which is the think tank that had come out with the COVID performance index. It is the Lowy Institute of Australia, right? And on that, New Zealand and Vietnam have been ranked as the best performing countries in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and India has been given a rank of 86 out of 98 countries, right? Then moving ahead, this is Linda Thomas Greenfield, the representative of the new administration to United Nations by the US, and she spoke again in favor of India being a permanent member, and talked also about the conflict of countries who are opposing it and countries who are in favor of it, right? Then the economic survey to be tabled today, as I began the video with, and on the left hand side it is IMF's Geeta Gopinathan. She talked about plug gaps in GST to raise fiscal, tightening policy support in middle of pandemic to raise of a pandemic risk economic damage. So what is this sheet talking about? Two things, right? One, tax slippage, that is people who are supposed to pay taxes may evade taxes. So that kind of concept is known as tax slippage, which should be curbed to boost the government's overall revenue. The next thing she is talking about, tightening policy support, that is the government should be liberal in the sense of providing policy support to the economy to give a boost to the economy in general, right? So this is what it means. Moving ahead, apart from that, on the economic front, nothing relevant for us. Then going ahead on the sporting side also, not relevant for us, no new real updates, right? There is a shroud of clouds on the Tokyo Olympics that had been postponed because of COVID-19 pandemic, and that conversation is going ahead. Till now, the official position is that the Tokyo Olympics will take place, right? So on that note, I will end for the day. I will keep an eye on the economic survey. Some of it we will discuss tomorrow. So make sure you brush up on the economics topics that we have discussed till now, and so that you understand the other important concepts related to the budget and the economic survey in depth. So on that note, thank you so much. Lastly, I will address the videos that for which we had not published yet. They will be uploaded on a daily basis because we don't want to crowd too much information on one day. We will be doing it day by day, right? So on that note, thank you so much. If you like the content that we are uploading, please give this video a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, do subscribe to it. Thank you.